All right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the second annual Introduction to Environmental Law series. This is put on by the Environmental Law section and the New Lawyers section of the California Lawyers Association. As you can see, this is part of a series that's been going on this year leading up to our annual Environmental Law Conference in Yosemite that's set to take place in just about 2 weeks in October. Earlier this summer, we did Hazardous Waste Law 101 in June. We hope to do a second part to that later this fall or in the winter. We also had Colorado River Law 101 in August, as well as Coastal Law 101 in August. And recordings of those presentations, as well as the PowerPoints, will be available on our website. So today you're here for Environmental Law Careers 101, and I'm just going to do a few introductory slides before we get into the main content. So first off, the California Lawyers Association is the nonprofit voluntary organization dedicated to the professional advancement of attorneys practicing in the state of California. It used to be part of the state bar, and it separated a few years ago and is comprised of 17 sections of different subject matter areas. The California New Lawyers section is one of those sections now. It recently joined as a section previously known as the California Young Lawyers Association. And they represent all lawyers in California in their first 8 years of practice. And they advance practical skills, leadership and pro bono opportunities, networking and support to meet the needs of California's diverse community of new lawyers. The Environmental Law section advances the quality, breadth, and availability of information and services related to environmental, natural resources, land use, and energy law, and enhances the profession by cultivating a well-informed, collegial, and diverse group of lawyers and law students throughout the state. So again, this program is put on jointly by ELS and NLS. So ways to get involved in all of CLA's activities. So you can join one of CLS at large, or ELS or NLS, or one of the other sections that fall under the umbrella of CLA. We have lots of programs constantly going on. There's webinars and in-person events. You can earn MCLE credit through online videos or self-study materials. You can submit an article to our e-news or other section publications. We have free videos on our YouTube channel. You could participate in student negotiating and writing competitions. We have a bi-monthly book club where you can come and discuss a book. And I think next year we're going to try to have the authors for those books at each of the book club sessions. We also have a summer diversity and inclusion fellowship for law students. I'm going to talk about a little bit more at the end. You can nominate people for the ELS Lifetime Achievement Award, or the New Lawyers section Jack Berman Award for public service. And we also have job boards if you're looking for a new career position. So without further ado, we'll turn it to today's session, which is focused on environmental law careers. I'm going to introduce our esteemed panelists. I want to thank them at the outset for volunteering their time to participate today. We're going to go through some questions, and then we'll have a period for question and answer. You can use the Q&A feature to ask questions as they come to mind, and then we will ask some of them during that Q&A portion. Depending on the amount of time we have, we may not be able to get to all of those questions. And then we'll wrap it up at the end, plugging some of our upcoming events that you may be interested in. So first off, we have Jennifer Ganata, a senior attorney with Communities for a Better Environment. So she works at a nonprofit organization, and we wanted to make sure we have people providing perspectives from different sectors of environmental law. So she works for a nonprofit organization. And then we have Paige Samblanet, who is an associate with Brownstein Hyatt Barber and Schreck LLP. She works for a private firm, obviously, so a different sector. And then we have Tina Cannon Leahy, who is staff counsel 4 with the Office of Chief Counsel for the State Water Resources Control Board. And she works for a public agency. So welcome, Jennifer, Paige, and Tina. So first, our first discussion question is to please tell us about your career path to your current position and why you enjoy the work you do. So I think I'll start it off with Tina.
Thank you, Miles, for having me participate in this. It's really always a pleasure to be able to talk to students and new lawyers about environmental law. My path was a bit of a winding one. And so I had done an externship in law school for a private firm, even though I had always imagined that I would be in public service. And that private firm where I did the externship, it was a wonderful natural resources boutique firm, hired me out of law school. And so I started in private practice. And then, like a lot of people, I had a small child and I wanted more flexibility. And so everyone said to me, well, you should consider going to work for the California Department of what was then called Fish and Game, at the time a public agency. And so, and this is a lesson in having contacts, which we'll probably come back to, but the networking can really, really help you in environmental law, because I hadn't considered the California Department of Fish and Game, now called Fish and Wildlife, and it turned out to be a wonderful experience. So I went to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, now I'll just call it that, and developed my expertise in an area of the water operations, actually, in California. And that led to a job at the legislature. So I was giving a talk one time on California water operations and caught the eye of someone who became a future legislator, who then invited me to come and to work at the legislature. And from the legislature, I ended up going actually back to an agency. So it's been a bit of a circuitous path, but I would say the thing that I love about it is that environmental law is very technical, can be very biological, and there are always very interesting issues and a diversity of them. So thank you, Miles.
Thank you, Tina. How about Jennifer?
Yes, thanks again for having me here. As Miles mentioned, I work at Communities for a Better Environment, which is a statewide organization. Our office is located in Northern California and Southern California. I'm based out of Los Angeles, so I'm in the SoCal office. And as a nonprofit, we work often with community members. That's actually who I represent. I represent the organization, which is based on community members who are organizing around environmental justice. So I actually started off wanting to go, I went to law school to want to do environmental justice. And I think the law school that I was at, I was actually on the East Coast that didn't have at that time anything related to environmental justice. So I kind of took internships on my own and finding places. I was in New York, so I was interning with the Public Interest Lawyers Project, I think, and they have an environmental justice team. And that was like one of the first things I did. I actually met a woman there who was working out in California before, and I moved to New York. Her name's Veronica Edie. Veronica, actually, I believe she's at I think she's at the Bay Area Quality Management District. So, so she told me that if I wanted to do environmental justice work, it probably made sense for me to go back to LA, but go back to California, because that's really where a lot of environmental law, environmental justice is happening. So a lot of the things that we do here influences the rest of the country. So then I started thinking, like, how am I going to do that? Because I'm in New York. I ended up getting a fellowship, which I think now is the CLA's Environmental Law Diversity Fellowship, but it was at that time, I think, the ABA Minority Bar Fellowship for environmental law. And I had that fellowship for the summer, and I started connecting with people who do environmental justice. I was actually placed in the mayor's office in Los Angeles at the time. And through that, I met a lot of the people I work with now who do environmental justice work. And then by the time I had graduated law school, it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do? I didn't have a fellowship. I didn't have a job lined up. I had a background in organizing, and I saw that Communities for a Better Environment actually had a job opening for an organizer. So I started off as an organizer. At some point, I became a legal fellow. And then I still wasn't sure if I was going to practice law. I actually ended up leaving CBE in 2012. I got my LLM, and then I did housing work. I did eviction defense work and a lot of land use. And after that, in 2018, I came back to CBE as a senior staff attorney. And I think the combination of learning how to do a lot of different things as an organizer, and also then being a direct legal services attorney, and then coming back to do work at CBE has really, influenced a lot of the cases that we're picking up. And I think I really enjoy working with community members. I went to law school to be a community lawyer, and I think I figured out a little bit what that is, but I'm continuing to learn what that means and what that means to also do that in this space of practicing environmental law, but also picking up other parts of law as I do my job. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer. And yes, our fellowship did used to be under the ABA, and that's when I also was lucky enough to receive it as well. And now it's under back under our section. So that's great that helped you lead you to your career path today. All right, Paige, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Miles. And thank you everybody for being here. As Miles said, I'm Paige. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a relatively new attorney. I graduated, took the bar, and started practicing all in 2020. So it's definitely been a roller coaster. But I actually didn't start off my college career knowing I wanted to become an attorney. I didn't think I actually wanted to practice law at all. That wasn't on my career path. My major was undergrad, and undergrad was biology and physics, but I minored in natural resource law and policy, and I liked it, but I thought that I wanted to focus on the science aspect of environmental health and environmental protection. So after graduating, I was a scientist at an environmental consulting firm, and I focused in water quality and climate change aspects. And then I realized that wasn't the path I wanted to continue on, because I wanted to effectuate change and wanted to work closer with impacted parties on environmental matters. So I went to law school. And throughout law school, I actually worked at a government agency, small firms, and larger and smaller nonprofits. And I really wanted to see what I liked. And I also received the fellowship, and that was kind of my lifeline. And it really, really helped me to focus my career path. And after I graduated, I started out at a smaller firm and then transitioned to my current firm, Brownstein. And in my current role, I work in a few different practice areas within environmental law. And my main focuses are land use, California Environmental Quality Act, which is known as CEQA, water rights and water quality. And I do a little bit of cannabis work, which is really fun and exciting. And I enjoy this work because it never gets boring. You're always learning something and constantly having to keep up with the science that guides the environmental decision making. And I love knowing that our work has a real impact on people's lives and businesses, and essentially the future of what our world will look like. So thank you again.
Thank you, Paige. And Tina, in a second, I'm going to come back to you to just follow up on why you enjoy the work that you do. But just briefly, I'll provide my example. I'm a little similar to Tina. After law school, I did a fellowship for a year at a law school, and then I worked at a firm working with public agencies for several years. And then I came to the city of Ventura, and I've been there for 6.5 years now, doing environmental law for them. And I really enjoy practicing environmental law at the local government level. I also enjoyed it at a law firm and doing the fellowship. And I think what I enjoy about the work that I do is I think generally government wants to do the right thing when it comes to environmental matters. They just need help getting it done and getting it implemented. So that's what I really enjoy about my work, is helping the city try to get good projects done, looking toward sustainable projects so that we're ready for the future for our community while also protecting the environment. So Tina, I'll just briefly follow up with you to touch on why you enjoy the work that you do.
I think it goes back to, something Jennifer said. California is such an incredible place to practice environmental law. And for example, part of the work that I'm doing is implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. And that's a brand new statute that's never been implemented before. And you find that you're constantly being faced with novel issues, and that, as Paige said, it is never boring. I have never had to watch the clock and wonder, gosh, isn't it noon yet? I mean, every day I feel like I'm on a luge going down a hill, just trying to, because there are so many fascinating issues. So I do really enjoy the technical part of it. I would also say that, when I was in private practice, I hadn't imagined that I would be in private practice before I ended up being hired out of law school into private practice. And it goes back to something that you said, Miles. I envisioned I would be a public interest attorney, and I would be wearing the white hat, and I would be the good guy. And then when I was in private practice, what I realized was that a lot of the regulated community, they just really wanted to know what was the right thing to do. And I had a lot of municipal clients and others. And it was a great lesson for me to be open-minded, because sometimes what you envision a job will entail is not what exactly it will entail. So thank you for the follow-up question, Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. All right, we will go to the next question. And if you have any questions for each other, you can keep that in mind in case we have time in the Q&A. So our second question, what advice would you provide to law students, recent graduates, or practitioners interested in your line of work? So I think some of our audience may include law students, recent graduates, so new lawyers, but also more experienced practitioners who might want to transition to the field of environmental law. So Jennifer, maybe I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah. So I feel like the space that takes up environmental justice works is very small, particularly if you're attached to a community-based organization. We do have partners who work, like different environmental justice teams who work with NRDC and Earth Justice and Sierra Club, but a job specifically representing the organization, I think there are only a handful of us. It's like Communities for a Better Environment, Leadership Council, and Center for Race, Poverty, and Environment. So I think like for that, it's really kind of connecting with those attorneys. There's so much work to go around. Like if you think about, I think what kind of also, like for me, makes this very clear to me, there are about almost 40 million people in the state of California. Like a state like New Mexico only has 2 million people. So really like the work in which we're doing, like if we're doing environmental law, we're really shaping a lot of those things. Like, and I think if there's an area of law that you want to do, it's kind of just meeting those people, because it's really something that Tina said, it's really about networking and getting to know different people in those spaces. If you are a law student, I would suggest, interning or volunteering at any of the places I mentioned. Most places, not only during the summer do they have interns, like I know in my office, we have them throughout the year. So we'll have an extern. So if you want credits and you want to like kind of learn practical skills, like we have cases that go year round. So if you want to do work at the Public Utilities Commission, we do that work. We also do a lot of CEQA. We're looking at water quality. So there's like a wide range. And I think really like volunteering or interning is the best way to get into doing environmental justice. just because I actually also feel like our attorneys kind of switch different organizations. Like somebody will move to Earth Justice, or somebody will go back to like the California Environmental Justice Alliance, which is our statewide org, or they'll end up in Sacramento and they're still kind of working on stuff. So it's like, it is very like I guess a close circle of folks who are doing that work.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. I just wanted to chime in really quick. We got one question about, can we connect with the panelists to learn more about their work? So could we share email addresses in the chat or in a slide? Yes, we will have emails on the final slide here. So that is to come, stay tuned. All right, Paige, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, and I think this kind of touches on what Tina and Jen said, but I think whether you're a law student, a recent grad, or a practitioner already, I think networking in this space is essential. And I know Miles will get into this a little more later about different networking opportunities to meet people in this line of work. But I think there are so many opportunities to meet people and talk to them and get to know what they do while simultaneously learning about the work at conferences and webinars. And for me, as a law student, I kind of made a goal after my first year of law school to reach out to three to four attorneys each week, just to get coffee or to learn more about their practice. And that helped me to build up my network in that way. And so I think also going to networking events and kind of having a goal in mind put my nerves at ease, because I knew exactly kind of what I wanted to do and I had a game plan going in. And so I think for law students, sometimes these events can be a little overwhelming and intimidating, but if you have a goal and go in there and kind of know who you're looking for, I think it makes it a lot easier. And I also think that if you are undecided on which avenue you want to practice in, whether it is, a different environmental fields, if you want to do air, if you want to do water, if you want to do land, or the other route, if you don't know where you want to practice, private, government, nonprofit, I do think for law students, try to go to those places and intern or work your summers at different places to see what works best for you. Because I think Tina may have said it that I didn't go in thinking I wanted to do private practice, right? And I actually love it. And I know that because I went to each. I went to a government agency, I went to nonprofit, and I went to firms. And I realized that I really do enjoy firm work, which I didn't expect when I started law school. So I think those are some best tips and advice. And I do think that if you email an attorney after getting their business card and they don't follow up, I do encourage you to keep trying. Because I know for myself, now that I'm a practicing attorney, I can barely get my email inbox down to 0 unread emails. So I think sometimes I miss those. And I can only speak to myself, but I'm sure everybody on the panel is more than willing to talk to people and to get them introduced to this space and meet others. So, keep trying.
Great, thank you, Paige. Tina?
I think I'm going to follow up. I think we're all agreeing with each other. So there's a theme. Excuse my voice today. I'm getting over COVID. In the outreach, my mom, I will tell you that my mom, when I was interested, I can't remember if I was interested in going to law school or I was already there, said, you should reach out and you should talk to this attorney that I work with who's very well respected and does environmental law. She knew I had an interest. And I said, I can't do that. She's very busy. I'm not going to call her up and talk to her. And my mom said, no. I've talked to her and she said it would be fine. And it turned out to be a wonderful thing that I did. She actually became a friend of mine and a mentor of mine. And it's a way of, you may find out that there are areas of the law or agencies or companies, firms, nonprofit entities that you weren't even aware of that you could be interested in. And, it can be a little bit overwhelming, the environmental law field. It's an alphabet soup of acronyms. There are a lot of different players in it. And when you take those opportunities, they can pay dividends. I would say the other thing is, and I'll give a pitch for CLA, is to join the CLA environmental law section as a student, which is free. I was shocked when I was a student, which is now quite a while ago, let's just be honest, that I was one of the only people in my class that took those opportunities to join organizations for free as a student and to go to some of their, free continuing legal education, even though it was a bit over my head, but there was often a reception afterwards. And then I would meet people and have an opportunity to talk to them and to ask them about what they did. And it really helped to inform my career and my path.
Great, thank you, Tina. All right, the next question, and I'll start with Paige on this one. What alternatives to your line of work would you suggest to current students, recent graduates, or practitioners? And what skills or experiences would be transferable?
So I think legislative and policy positions are great opportunities. I know firms even, so my firm has numerous policy directors that are part of an entire lobbying division, and firms have that as well. And they work really closely with the attorneys and learn the ins and outs of all these legal issues and help to relay that information in a way that doesn't sound like it's coming from a legal textbook, which I think is sometimes a skill that some lawyers lack. We kind of forget not to talk with legal jargon all the time. And so I think that those are great alternatives to this line of work, especially. And I think skills that are transferable, I do think that knowing how to just talk with people and be able to hold a conversation and keep people engaged, I think is something that I found is very useful. And another plug for the negotiations competition that CLA ELS puts on. I think negotiating, day in and day out, whether it's with opposing counsel or even with clients, you have to be able to negotiate in one way or another and be convincing, right? And I think those skills are extremely transferable. So, yes.
Great. Tina?
So I'm going to follow up on what Paige said. I had the opportunity to work in the policy space, and that was a great opportunity. So I worked in the legislature. I was what's called a policy consultant, which is usually you hear consultant, somebody hired on the outside. In the legislature, that's somebody on the inside. So I was on the Assembly Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee, and I was the water law and policy expert for the Assembly. And that was an incredible experience. I think it is, you're able, obviously you're making law, so you can use your legal skills. Policy consultant jobs are kind of hard to come by. I was more of a senior attorney at the time that I got that position, but a lot of the members have people in their offices, either that intern or extern, or sometimes through programs that are at the legislature where folks can come in and they can do policy work, where you can learn how that policy is done. And as Paige said, it's a tremendous experience because, members are very smart. Actually, you get a lot more respect for the legislative process, I think, when you're on the inside of it. Members are very smart, but they're about, 100 miles wide and about 3 feet deep because they have to cover every issue. And you have to learn to give your elevator speech, which is when you summarize an issue on one page. And you have to learn to be very concise and very clear in your reasoning because they don't have a lot of time. But you also have the opportunity to turn the dial and maybe to make policy changes. I got to work on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act at the legislature, and that was a huge opportunity. So I would say policy work can be great for your career. I think just about everywhere they appreciate somebody that understands legislative policy. You can also do consulting work. Some folks go kind of a non-traditional path, and they might be working on environmental documents or other kinds of environmental approaches, and they do that from a consulting side rather than a legal side. And people get involved in government, in issues of in policy positions and leadership positions, because a legal degree is very valuable in terms of understanding environmental policy, environmental subjects, lots of different things. So a legal degree in environmental law can be very useful in a lot of places.
Thank you, Tina. Jennifer?
I'm so glad Tina said that. I was always wondering, how does one get a gig doing the consultant committee or committee consultants at the Capitol? Which is because I feel like there's a lot of power there. There really is, because I have to do a lot of policy work in addition to what I do, like for my legal docket. So, and I think they're really smart folks, and most of them are attorneys. But other alternatives to my line of work, I think I mentioned it. Well, because I did direct legal services, I'm still going to be in the world of like law, but like not doing the environmental law in the way that is more impact litigation or I guess like affirmative litigation. I would say I think direct legal services is, especially if you want to work in communities, really important. And I think there are ways that you start to kind of see like what's going on the ground with your clients. For me, when I stepped away from doing EJ and doing housing, I really saw like really a huge intersection between that. And I think there aren't enough people who do housing work who understand environmental work, which I think is like where we are in this problem. I did see a comment of like development and like what that means and how it's just kind of like turning back a lot of deregulating essentially a lot of the things that we've fought for. So I actually think understanding the environment and going to housing might be helpful. Because I think even some housing justice folks are just kind of like, I don't really get it. Like, what do you mean by environmental justice? And literally, when you say environmental justice, it's like you're fighting for the right to clean air, clean water, clean soil, where you live, work, and play. And so housing is definitely where you live. There is a direct intersection there. And I think being able to explain that to housing people and being like, especially as somebody who does environmental justice work, who uses CEQA, who needs a way for our communities to kind of get in to spaces and actually bring up public participation points and like have a seat at the table. I think like having an understanding of like how a project gets built and why they're getting built and why it's getting built and where it's getting built, I think is pretty important, particularly now because of the climate and climate emergency. Understanding how cities are being planned, I think there is a really strong need to have that background in environmental law and how does energy work? How do we get water? What does water conservation mean for a community that's developing? And I don't necessarily know if people see them as the same things or only see them as adversarial or so I think that would be important, like just being like maybe doing public planning or doing like something that helps you represent a community in that way. So that could be like local government. Yeah, and I think also academia, like, you can have an environmental law degree and go and teach, and maybe you want to do more. There are lots of different clinics that offer programs if you apply to them and get in, and that way you can kind of still like, get really deep into like understanding how environmental law is connected to all of the legal system, but also sharing that like passion and knowledge to other students and like being able to help other law students understand that, because we did have a legal fellow last year who left and is now at the UCLA Legal Clinic. And I don't have a doubt that he's probably sharing like all the different things that he really is interested about. And I think that's not necessarily, he's not practicing, but he's still, working in that space, and they do pick up clients. So I think that might be a space where environmental law would be transferable.
That's great. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you all for those really good suggestions. The only thing I would add from my experience is when I worked at a municipal law firm, it wasn't necessarily, you wouldn't think, oh, environmental law, but environmental law issues do come up for cities all the time. And so whenever those came up, I would volunteer to help with the project. And then once you've done some work, then you get more and more of that work. And suddenly I was, working on most of the environmental issues at the law firm. So that was a good way, just volunteering for environmental related work in whatever context you're in can help you build up more experience and make you more marketable for that next position you want. All right, and then the last of our prepared questions before we turn to the audience. Do you have any specific advice for law students or new lawyers from underrepresented communities, such as women and people of color, in securing job opportunities or advancing in their careers? So Tina, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think we've said it a lot, which is that you've got to build your networks. You really do. Because when people, and then when you get those opportunities, do the best work you can possibly do and shine. Because when you prove to people that you're capable and you don't necessarily need to know it all, it's very overwhelming when you come into environmental law. There's many different aspects of it. Many of it is technical. But, take those opportunities, build those networks. And I would also say lift each other up. One of the things when I came out of law school was I had a group of friends. And when we would be faced by doing some novel task, we would call each other because maybe one of us did it. And, we didn't want to quite show to the partner or the person that we were working for that we had no idea what we were doing, which is how we felt. And I remember calling a friend and saying, I'm going to do a deposition and I've never done one before. And she said, oh, I've done one and don't worry, everybody does them differently. And so, create that support network for yourself that can really help you to excel and where you can help others to excel as well, would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Tina. Jennifer?
Yeah, I totally agree with Tina. I think also the thing that I never did, and I realized it's probably really helpful, is find a mentor. And I think a mentor could be all different kinds of people, right? And I think from like interacting with folks who are going into like wanting to environmental justice work and kind of talking to them at the beginning of their career, it's just like finding a mentor, I think helps just sort of just show you like there are different ways that you can get through this, and maybe they understand what you're going through, and it's like just someone to bounce like ideas off of, because especially if you've never done like walk that path before, like how are you going to know? And I think having a mentor and finding that person is really helpful. I think in general, right, like I think I saw in the California bar like the release of the reports of just like diversity inclusion. I think things are slowly changing, but joining different spaces like this and kind of talking about these issues, I think that will help you also, I guess, like understand the lay of the land, but also help you in securing a job, and just helping you in your career down the path. But it definitely is connected to the networking, but also, like figuring out like where you are in this career can take a while. And finding other people who've done it already and just talking to them, whether that's like getting coffee with them or just like sending a cold call email. Like some people will respond. I often respond to people that I've never met, like ever. They just like, I Googled environmental justice in Los Angeles and your name came up, and I'll write back, because I know it's hard. It's hard if you don't know, especially if you're first generation or like you've never had a lawyer in your family and no one ever tells you anything. You definitely need to just seek that out, because no one's going to tell you in law school, unless you have a really supportive professor or something. But I think that would be a good start.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Paige?
Yeah, I feel like I could have just an entire panel just dedicated to this discussion alone.
Yes.
But I'll narrow it down to two pieces of advice. Building off of Tina and Jen, creating your network, and I think really having an advocate when you're not in the room. And I think that's really important to remember, that your network, even if you're not in this space and you want to break into this space, or you're a new attorney or a law student, having an advocate in the places where you want to work or the places you want to be, I think is really important. So yeah, building your network. And I think that the second piece of advice is to know your worth. And that's not just as a woman or as a person of color or a box that people want you to fit in so they can claim they have a DEI initiative. It's knowing your worth as a person and what you bring to the table as a person to this field. And I think for me, there have been times, throughout law school that I even questioned, why was I there, first generation and all of these things. And I felt that maybe I got certain jobs because I was a diversity hire, right? And not because of my knowledge or skill set. And I feel like that can be feel very alienating, but it's important to know that you belong in this space just as much as anyone else. And you got to where you are because you're great in more ways than just one. And so I think keeping that in mind and building your network and knowing your worth is very important. And obviously this panel is here to help. This is step one, right? So, if anyone needs to reach out, just let us know.
Thank you, Paige. And I'm also openly gay, and I was going to share literally all the things you already said. So I don't have anything to add, but thank you all for those really thoughtful responses. All right, so now we will turn to the audience questions and discussion. So again, if you have a question, please submit it via the Q&A feature. So we have a few questions already. So the first question, and Jennifer, you touched on this a little bit. So it is, the march of development seems to be to keep degrading the environment and privatizing what used to be public natural resources. Do you ever get discouraged about making a difference in the environmental law area? So Jennifer, you touched on this a little bit. Do you want to continue and take this one?
Yeah. I think there are probably days where I'm just like, wow, everything's kind of messed up. But I think, no, because I know like we are in a point in history, like lots of stuff has happened before us. And I'm sure there was lots of conflict then. And things might seem hopeless now, but I think that's also part of but with their feeling hopelessness, there's also lots of opportunity to change the way that we think and to change the way that we are just like on this planet and like how we are to one another. So I think at the end of the day, I think I'm more of an optimist.
Yeah, Jennifer, I was going to say the same thing. We need you more now than ever. So that's with all the issues going on, we need more passionate environmental lawyers in our field. But yes, that feeling is relatable. I think on this next one, I'll direct it to Tina. It's how helpful or essential is it to have a science background or degree if your interest is water law or policy? And I think this could apply, to environmental law in general, but go ahead, Tina.
I think it can be helpful, but it's not necessary. So my degree is in French with an English minor. And I do highly, highly technical water law issues. And I think that's a lot of lawyers, and you become an expert on that thing that you're working on, and you can develop that expertise, and you work with staff, in my case, who are hydrologists or geologists or biologists, and you learn from them. So whilst I think having that kind of background is certainly wonderful, it is not necessary. And that's been my experience.
Great. Yeah, and that's been my experience as well. I practice water law, and a lot of other colleagues in water law, had similar undergraduate degrees, do not have science degrees, and they are so smart and doing just fine in their careers. The next question, any advice more specifically aimed at making a career transition, oops, it just moved, early in a career? It can be hard to volunteer and network with law student opportunities when you're already working full-time. So Paige, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a friend who is going through this transition from one field into the environmental fields of law. And I think something that has been extremely useful for her is to go to these type of events, but as well as, you know, different in-person networking events, and also reaching out for coffee and just going to lunch with someone nearby in the area and talking about this field, and learning more and getting connected. And I think that's been extremely useful for her, because I think it shows a lot, right? When you have decided that you want to make this career transition, so people take you seriously. And yeah, so I think those are the best pieces of advice. I don't know if anybody else wants to build off of that.
Tina or Jennifer, do you want to add anything?
I was going to say it is a little bit easier now that we use virtual tools, and that's become very well accepted. And I know that I have people reach out to me, and by the way, I want to say the same thing. I can sometimes my workload can be very, very high. And if somebody reaches out to me and doesn't hear from me right away, it's not that I'm not interested in talking to you. It's that I just may be in one of those cycles where my workload is really high. But I think the virtual tools really help somebody who's very busy, who's working full time and all of that, because it allows you an opportunity to have a face-to-face experience with somebody, and while still being at home and maybe not having to use the time it would take to drive or what have you. So I would say, you know, don't be afraid to use those virtual tools when your time is limited.
Thanks, Tina. All right, the next question, what sorts of things would you study if you want to get a 101 level understanding of environmental law? Any must reads? So first off, you can watch the previous sessions we have in our series. We did this series this summer, and then there were ones last summer as well on Water Law 101, Air Quality 101, and CEQA 101, if you want those. But maybe Jennifer, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, you know, I actually was introduced to environmental justice in a class at UCSD when I was finishing up, and I was taking this environmental racism class, and one of the books that were assigned was From the Ground Up. I believe that's a Luke Cole book. And it's about environmental justice. And it actually kind of was like, oh, I shared in the chat that I was like or I answered saying that I was an ethics studies major. So it's kind of like I didn't have legal, really, other than like civil rights stuff on my mind. And then like I read this book and it was like, there are so many things that you can do and it's connected to the environment. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend that book. I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, Jennifer. Tina, how about you?
Every water lawyer reads Cadillac Desert by the late Mark Reisner, which is a classic about California water. So if you're fascinated, it's very well written. It's a little impolitic. I went back and reread it more recently, and I was sort of shocked because Mr. Reisner pulls no punches with his opinions. The other person who writes on California water and is amazing is Mark Arax. And he wrote a book recently called The Dreamt Land about California water. So Mark Arax, I would say more recently, and Cadillac Desert, the classic.
Great. And Paige, do you have any suggestions?
You know, I actually have a lot of books at home and I'm trying to think of all the names, but I do two of them. The Color of Law is a very, very good read. And then also there is, I believe it's called Clean White Spaces, and it talks about the history of essentially environmental racism. And it's a very, very big book, but it's really good. And I don't know who asked this question, but email me so I can remind myself to go back and look at all these books and send them to you. So.
Great, thanks, Paige. And I would just say there are some great kind of general environmental law treatises out there that cover environmental law in general. And then there's more specific ones on certain subject matter areas. So there's some great ones on water law. There's some great ones on CEQA. We referenced some great books on environmental justice. So I would look into to those, and you could probably check them out at your local law library and ask for those relevant treatises. And I think that's always a good place to start as well. All right, and thank you, audience, for being so engaged. We have a lot of great questions in the chat. I don't think we're going to get to them all, but we should be able to catch on 2 or 3 more. So here's one. Can everyone say some pros and cons about the type of work they do, and why is the current position you're in right for you? So Tina, I'll start with you on this one.
Pros and cons. One of the real pros about the work I do right now is I work for the State Water Resources Control Board, which regulates in the area of water rights. There are also regional water boards that regulate in water quality, and the State Water Board does that. But we also have the drinking water program, and now we have groundwater. So one of the things I like is working in all of these different areas that are highly complex. I will go back to an earlier question that somebody asked about, how do you feel about environmental law? And I think one of the things that's difficult is you have to take a rather long view. The ship of state moves slowly. It does not turn quickly. And so when you're working in these spaces, sometimes effectuating policy change can take a long time. And there are very complex political dynamics involved in it. And you are not in charge. When you are a lawyer for an agency, you are not the policy person, you are the attorney for the agency. So I would say that one of the things that can be frustrating is working on projects that can take a very, very long time. But on the other side, it is such fascinating work, and it's wonderful to work on teams of people. When I was at the legislature, I was by myself, and that was rather challenging. It was exciting, but very challenging. I had a partner, but she did the parks and wildlife issues. I did all of the water issues. And now I'm on teams of wonderfully intelligent, nice people, and that collaboration is fantastic. So those are some of the things that I like and some of the challenges.
Thanks, Tina. Jennifer?
I think one of the things I really like about CBE is part of like our organizing principles, which is kind of the ethos of the organization. And what we're trying to do, right, is working towards a just transition. And the way that we talk about that often is moving away from an extractive economy to a regenerative one. So for at CBE, we do a lot of like stopping oil drilling in neighborhoods and trying to move away from fossil fuels. And I think the whole like stopping the bad and bringing in the good and thinking about like what that means for the community, that's something that really resonates for me. And one of the real reasons I came back to CBE was I felt like I wanted to do environmental justice when I was in law school, and I kind of like always kept that in mind, and I was thinking about what do I want from a job. And I think the values are really important to me. So I think that is a pro. I think one of the cons are there's just so much to do. Like, you start thinking about energy, and then you have to think about like, well, like, how do we have that infrastructure? So then where are you going to build? Where are you going to put things? So all of it becomes really interconnected, and it can feel pretty overwhelming, but it is, I think another pro is like, there is a good community of folks who really share kind of in a vision of like what we're doing. And like just want to like reiterate, like a lot of the things that we're doing in California is very groundbreaking. The rest of the rest of the country doesn't really have all the things that we are doing. And I think it 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 just like kind of talking to other people in other states, you start to realize like, wow, there are so many wins, and then maybe like not everything is a win, but there are so many good things about like being in California and doing this work here. And I think that is also a pro. It's kind of like leading that discussion of where we're going, just in terms of resources and things.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Paige?
Yeah, so I think some of the pros were touched on, but there's just so much to get involved with. And so I'm doing water work and land use and cannabis, and there's all these different really technical fields that I get to work in, and I really enjoy it. And then I also like the breadth of clients that I represent. So it's public agencies, it's farmers, it's companies. And so you get to kind of see how each piece works and the issues that each has. So you start to understand more. It's not just one sector, but kind of really looking at everybody's issues and trying to see how you can solve them and everyone's perspectives. So I really enjoy that. And I think a few of the cons, Jen touched on one, is, it does get overwhelming, right? It's like, well, there's so much to do here, but I also have to turn my attention here. And is this ever going to get solved? And, I think it's a little overwhelming at times, and you kind of question if you really are making a difference. But then there are those times, right, that you're thanked by a client or you really help to push something forward, and California's groundbreaking. So I think that's always really exciting. And it kind of puts everything back into perspective that, you are making a difference. And I also think that with private practice, you don't always get to choose your clients. And I think that is something that is very hard and something that I think people should take into account when you make your decision about, where you want to work or where you want to try to practice, but also know that, your first job isn't necessarily going to be your last. You can change, you can transition, you can go into you can go to a nonprofit from the private sector and all of these things. And so you're not necessarily stuck, but if you enjoy it and you feel fulfilled, then, you're on the right track.
Thank you, Paige. And in our last few minutes here, we're going to just touch on a few more things. So first of all, we wanted to mention the environmental law section's upcoming environmental law conference at Yosemite. It's going to be October 13th to 16th at the Tenaya Lodge, just outside of Yosemite National Park. It features 27 educational sessions with great speakers, fun outdoor activities in the afternoon and evening, and lots of social events. And this is a great place in order to meet environmental law practitioners if you're interested in transitioning to this field. So we hope you can make it. I want to highlight on Thursday at 7:30, we have a law student and first-time attendee reception. So if you're going, please make sure you attend that so we can meet you. And there is the registration link. I just want to mention that if you cannot make it this year, we do offer scholarships. So you can look out for the scholarship applications to be released next summer so that you can attend the conference at a reduced rate. Next, this is for law students. We have our Environmental Law Diversity and Inclusion Fellowship Program. It is 8 to 10 weeks over the summer with a stipend. You also get assistance with placement at your summer position with a governmental or environmental law organization, and you're matched with mentors who practice in the field for the summer. You also get to attend the Yosemite conference with free registration. There's the link to apply, and the deadline to apply this year is October 24th. So make sure you get your applications in and spread the word. And then finally, I know there were some questions in the chat about mentorship. We are launching a new mentorship program this upcoming year. So it's a 12-month commitment, so it'll be in 2023. You can sign up now. The deadline is December 15th. So for mentors and mentees, it's really a way to connect. Mentees will get matched with an experienced attorney. And for mentors, it's really a way to give back to the profession. So please sign up for that. We really want this first year to be successful for that program. And that's it. Thank you so much for attending. I want to thank our speakers, Paige, Tina, and Jen. Thank you so much for volunteering your time. Here's the link to where the materials and recordings from previous sessions are held, and you can be on the lookout for future programs. If we didn't get to one of your questions, we apologize, but there's our contact information. You can reach out to us directly if you have additional questions. Again, thank you to all our speakers, and thank you so much for attending. Have a great week.